Go for the proceedings then. So you're welcome here. Hi, good evening, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second day of our International Virtual Faculty Development Program, which we started from 5th of December yesterday, and it will be up to 12th of December. So we have today's session, we have three guest speakers, three resource persons with us, and my privilege will be to share with you the introductory, and the moderating part will be done by me. So it's my privilege to share with you the introduction of Dr. Dari Dekane. I hope I am pronouncing the words rightly, sir. So you'll apologize for that. So Dr. Dari Dekane is currently the Vice President for Academics at St. Patrick School of Quezon City, Philippines, and a graduate school professor of the Manuel L. Quezon University. He's also the Deputy Country Director of the International Internship University, a senior research consultant of the Common Ground Research Network, inclusive in the USA, and the International Academic Forum, IAFOR, in Japan. He has published so many research publications and presented papers abroad. His expertise areas include pedagogy, curriculum, research, educational technology, collaborative learning, and the sustainable development goals initiatives. And Dr. Diary is PhD in education. And I should, before we start the topic, I would like to add few words. As all of us, we know about, we are rather on day-to-day basis, we talk about the quality research, and we say quality research should adhere to the principles of professionalism. We should be accountable what we are doing in the research, and we should be having full responsibility, and they should be replicable and transparent. These are the basic characteristics which characterize actually a quality research. But for me and for all of you, we should be also knowing that the best what makes research a real quality is what kind of approach, what kind of techniques we are following. So it's very necessary to know the qualitative research techniques. So Dr. Diary will be speaking on qualitative research techniques. Sir, you are welcome. The stage is yours, and share with the ideas. Welcome, yes.
Thank you very much to the organizer of this faculty development conference. I am delighted to see everyone. Hopefully, I'll be able to share and contribute my knowledge in doing qualitative research. So I'll be sharing my slide to everyone. Okay, wait. Okay, is my slide visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's
Okay.
visible.
All
So
right,
proceed.
so good afternoon to everyone, and good evening to the others who are joining us for this very significant and relevant conference. So I'm going to talk about tools and techniques in research, primarily about qualitative research techniques. And I'm delighted again, and thank you very much for inviting me over. And hopefully, again, I'll be able to contribute to the body of knowledge, especially competencies in doing research, more of the qualitative research. Now, qualitative research, um, I remember when I started doing my PhD 5 years ago, um, qualitative research is not really that popular yet because most of the researchers are into the quantitative research because you talk about numbers quantitatively. Some are doing the mixed method of both quantitative and qualitative, but very rarely do you see researchers dwelling on this kind of research. But I am just going to talk about first the qualitative and the quantitative research. You all know this already, the types of research. And there are different types of research based on the different aspects, such as the purpose of your research, the process, and most importantly, the outcome of the research. Now, when you talk about the purpose of doing research, And you know this one, it could either be just purely descriptive, analytical, you explore or exploratory, and the predictive research. Now, when you talk about descriptive research, there the following are the descriptions of what this research is all about. Let me just pick a few of it. Okay. Anyways, I'm going to be able to give a copy of this one. The methods used by these researchers involve the survey method of all kind, including the comparative and even the correlational model or the method. Sorry. And then we have the analytical research, mainly carrying out the analysis on a phenomena and which involves secondary data. And the aim of this kind of research is to understand the phenomena by discovering and measuring the causal relations among them. And then you also have the so-called exploratory research. You conducted about a research problem and there are a few or no earlier studies to refer to, and the focus is on gaining insights and familiarity for later investigations or undertaken when the problem are in a preliminary stage of investigation. And then of course we have the predictive research, determine the frequency with which something occurs or its association with something else. And then, of course, we now talk about the processes of doing research. You could either be doing the qualitative research, the quantitative research, and some doing both the mixed method. Now, as a beginner or starter of doing research, I suggest to focus on just one particular process in doing research, especially for those who are taking up their master's degree. I suggest you choose just one method first or the process. Why either you do qualitative or quantitative research. Maybe later on, when you're already an expert of the process, then you can do the mixed method already. I would always tell my graduate students um, during their preliminary stages of doing research, you choose whether you're going to do qualitative or quantitative. Just do the mixed method later on when you're an expert, either of the quality or the quantitative research. Now, when we talk about again the qualitative research, it's handled with the qualitative phenomena that involves the quality or the kind. And the research designed to find out how, you talk about here, you make use of the five senses when you do qualitative research. Again, you make use of your senses, how people feel, what people often think are coming under this research. And it's important in behavioral sciences. And the aim is to discover the underlying motives of human behavior through detailed description. And the data here is in the form of words, pictures, or objects, or maybe a combination of all of those that has been mentioned. Now, this research is based on the measurement of quantity or the amount. Now, I'm talking about the quantitative research because here you talk about measurements, you talk about numbers. And this can only be expressed in terms of the quantity. And the researcher used tools such as the questionnaire or the equipment to collect data and many others. Here, data is in the form of numbers again or statistics. You have your hypothesis. And the data is more efficient and you need to be able to test it. Now, let's go back to the types of research coming under the category of the outcome. You could either do the applied action research or the fundamental or the basic or the pure research. In the Philippines, many of the basic education teachers, both in public and private schools, are being required of doing their action research. But normally, in the Philippine setup, when you do your master's or your PhD, you normally do the fundamental or the basic or the pure research. Now, in the applied research, it's defined as a research which is used to answer a specific question or solve a specific problem, or you have to be able to gain better understanding. It's also known as the action research. By the very word action research, an immediate answer to a problem being seen being seen or being experienced by a teacher, let's say in a classroom setup, in the school, and many others. And this applied research, it aims at finding solution for an immediate problem facing in society or an organization through the systematic inquiry involving the practical application of science. Now, in the fourth description, it is designed to solve problem of modern world than acquire knowledge. And then the fundamental or the basic or the pure research, this is concerned with the generalization and the formulation of theory. Now, this is done for the intellectual pleasure on learning, and it has no commercial value attached to the discoveries that result from the basic research. Now, this type of research has the limited direct applications, but in which researcher has carefully control over the research setting. And it involves the collection and analysis of data to develop or enhances the theory and have an understanding of the theoretical relationship between the variables. And there are some other types of research that you might want to consider. You have the one-time research, the longitudinal research, the field setting research, clinical, historical, conceptual, and the empirical research. Now, keep in mind that when you talk about qualitative and quantitative research, now in a qualitative research, again, I would normally emphasize is that generally you have to deal with the words, the images, and it is subjective. Now, in the quantitative research, again, this time, of course, it deals with the numbers, logic, and objective. And later on, the normal questions. If you're going to use qualitative, sir, it's subjective. And how are you going to be able to check on the reliability, right, of the data itself? Of course, there are ways for you to be able to consider things in terms of the reliability or the validity of the data that you're going to be able to do. Okay, that's why you can do the triangulation, and when you have collected the data already, uh, you have uh, you have analyzed the data. And one thing for you to be able to find out the reliability is to go back, okay, to go back to your participants and have it validated with the participants that you have been able to have interviewed. So that's one, and the other things that you can do to really check the so-called reliability of the data later on. Now, the types of data, again, for example, qualitative, you talk about, again, words, descriptions, it was great fun. What in the quantitative, again, you talk about numbers, measurements. It could be discrete and it can be continuous. And again, another example, qualitative data, you talk about words, like, easy, awkward, efficient, ambiguous, how, okay? Normally, when you do the qualitative, the research questions in a qualitative um, uh, design, normally, you would normally use the word or the question how, okay? You would normally see that in the research questions for the qualitative research. Now, the classification of research design, okay? You see the example here for the quantitative design. You could either do the experimental, the non-experimental, and for the experimental, you see here the true experimental, the quasi-experimental, the pre-experimental. Well, in the qualitative design, you talk about the major qualitative designs being used today. You could either do a phenomenological study, an ethnographic study, a grounded theory, or the most one of the most popular one is the case study. So I'll be talking about the four uh, very classic and very popular qualitative design: the phenomenological, ethnography, the grounded theory, and the case study. So with the four qualitative design, you can never be wrong in terms of using those particular research design under the qualitative. So again, I am emphasizing quantitative, qualitative. Okay. In quantitative hypothesis, all beans are alike. While for qualitative, for example, what is a bean? Or what does it mean to be a bean? In quantitative, it can be null and no beans are different. The method, you count the beans. For qualitative, you have to examine the beanness in the field. You know, when you're doing research, especially in the qualitative way, sometimes when you get to do already your data analysis after reading and reading the responses of your participants, later on when the data starts to talk to you already and you'll be able to see similarities, okay, of what your participants are saying. Remember, when you're doing qualitative research, you're talking about here fewer fewer respondents depending on um, um, of course whether you're talking about uh, the sample size, okay, of your research. Okay, normally in a qualitative research design, the sampling technique that normally is being used is the purposive sampling technique. So you can never get wrong in terms of the sampling technique. That would be the purposive sampling technique. Let's move on. We'll talk about that later on. So the distinguishing characteristic of both, again, qualitative data, the quality, and the quantitative, we talk about the quantity. I think this is very easy to understand. Okay? The purpose of qualitative is to describe and explain, to explore and interpret, and to build theory. So in qualitative, okay, um, you talk about a holistic approach, and you talk about here. Normally in qualitative, you don't talk about the variables, but you talk about the concepts. Okay, the concepts in the research itself. Now there can be flexible guidelines, the emergent design, the context bound, and you talk about being subjective. Because in qualitative research design, one very good technique is that this is normally author based, meaning your research design will depend on the particular author that you're going to be able to use in the research design for qualitative. For example, if you're doing a case study, okay, it's author specific. You might want to consider, let's say, Robert Ian. Robert Ian is a very popular author of a case study. So you might want to use his the methods, okay, on how the methodology and the data analysis. It's also the same with phenomenology and then even ethnography. So you would be able to focus on a specific author that would later on help you out in the data analysis. Now, the form of reasoning for qualitative, normally it's inductive analysis from a specific situation to later on to a general case. So in qualitative, you talk about narrative description. And that's why, um, uh, for example, if you're let's say for a case study, right, that would depend whether you are doing a single case study focusing on just one organization or a multiple case study and focusing on many organizations. Okay? So you have words, you have quotes, personal voice, literary style. Okay? So in qualitative research, the research or the gathers information that is not in the numerical form. I think this was what made mentioned earlier already. So qualitative research examples, let's say uh, the diary accounts, the document review, the open-ended questionnaires, the unstructured interviews, and the unstructured observations. Okay. So normally when you get to interview, let's say your participants, okay, you would have to record it, you would have to transcribe it later on, but there would be softwares that could actually, let's say, the recorded voice of the one that you have interviewed can actually be um, translated into the actual text already. But I remember when I did my qualitative research, I did it manually. That's why it took a while for me to really come up with to do the coding and later on create the themes out of the data that I got from the participants. So quali, your purpose is to understand and to interpret the social interaction. I think this is very clear, to understand and interpret the social interactions. Well, when you do quantitative, you're testing the hypothesis. You
Excuse me,
look at
sir.
the cause and you make
1 minute. We
prediction.
cannot see the screen properly.
It cannot be seen.
Yeah.
Wait. Mhm.
Screen sharing was actually disturbed.
Uh-huh. Wait, wait.
Somebody shared the screen and your screen got disturbed that way. So
Ah,
you please
no
go
wonder.
again to the sharing of
Okay. Can,
screen.
can, can you now see is it visible?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's
That's good. Okay. No worries. Okay. So let me proceed now. So when you do qualitative, smaller and not randomly selected. Okay. So you talk about your fewer participants, your focused. For example, of course, that will depend on, let's say, when you do your master's or your PhD, that would depend on your panel, no? As to the number of participants. Normally, um, normally in a qualitative research, that will depend on the author itself as to the number of participants. For example, Creswell made mention of around, I think, 6 to 10 participants when you talk about the number of participants that you're going to use. But then again, that will depend on the panelists of the recommendations as to how many can be included in terms of the participants. I remember when I defended my paper has something to do with the outcomes based education of several schools in Metro Manila. So the number of participants that was approved, okay, of my research was I think it was around 7 higher education institutions. So from those 7 higher educational institutions, I was able to have interviewed primarily the vice presidents or the persons in charge with the curriculum. It took a while because you have to be able to schedule, the meetings with them. Of course, you have to record everything. Then you have to transcribe it. Okay. Normally, in one interview, how many pages is that? Normally, I remember I would have around roughly 20 to 30 pages of transcribed answers coming from the participants. So imagine if you have, let's say, 30 pages times the number of participants, okay? And qualitative research is really very challenging, no? Unlike when you do quantitative, it's very exact, no? Because they talk about numbers. there's statistics. But here, you really have to be able to
Excuse me,
check.
sir. Mr. Jatin, can you please stop sharing your screen?
Oh,
It's
okay.
getting disturbed. Mr. Jatin.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Let
There's
me share.
again a disturbance.
No
There's
worries.
again a disturbance. So
Okay. Let me share
please.
it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait.
Participants are requested not to share screen during the presentation. Kindly.
Wait. Okay, let me share again.
Yeah, yeah. It gets disturbed whenever the other person
Okay.
comes into play.
Is it visible?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So requesting our dear participants, please don't share. Okay, let's go back. Okay. So again, I think I'm done with this one. Uh, okay. I was saying earlier, so the participants will depend on the approval coming from, excuse me, the panelists. But according again to Crestwell, you can have six to I think 6 to 10 participants for a qualitative research. So imagine, no, normally when you interview one participant, I remember I have around 30 pages. So 30 times around 7, you have 200 plus pages for you to be able to look at those, no, and be able to see the similarities, no, of what they're saying. Okay. And later on, if those the data, starts to talk to already to you and would tell you that for example, participants number 1, 2, and 3, the things that they're saying are somewhat similar, then later on you can already, tell to yourself that you are already in the right path of doing your qualitative research. Now, your role in doing qualitative research, the researcher and their biases may be known to the participants in the study, and participant characteristics may be known to the researcher. That's why later on, um, you can actually see some biases, no? Because some researchers, let's be honest with this one, no? There are really biases when you do qualitative research, but there are ways definitely for you to be able to set aside those biases when you do qualitative research, particularly or specialized findings that is less generalizable. Okay. And when you talk about the qualitative final report, there's a narrative report with contextual description. There are direct quotations from the research participants, okay, uh, especially in the findings, no. You need to be able to actually get the direct quotations, and later on that direct quotation, you need to be able to synergize that with the literature that you have. Okay, for example, participant number 1 said this direct quotation, and later on you have to be able to find that particular literature that would say that participants what participant number 1 said is true, is authentic, and you base it later on with your literature. So in qualitative, you talk about the qualities, behavior, and the complexities. Okay. And what are the type of questions being asked in quality? Normally, I think I made mention this one. It's normally the why and the how. Okay, the why and the how. Now, as to, for example, the number of research questions, of course, that will depend, no, on that will depend on your research design. For example, when you do a grounded theory, you can probably have just one question, but out of that one question, there are many things that your participant would later on be able to tell you. For example, when you talk about grounded theory, literally there are no literature available from the very beginning, because you really have to get the literature out of scratch. So how are the questions placed, or the methods? Normally in qualitative, the document review, okay, participant observations, interviews, and focus group, and even the workshops. Okay? That is very important when you talk about the methods that you're going to be able to use when you're doing qualitative research. So how the results are interpreted for qualitative, you try to explore, you explain, you understand. There's a narrative, particularly mainly the inductive reasoning. There's conclusions, or the conclusions can be drawn from the evidence, no matter how incomplete. So again, going back to the qualitative research, ask broad general questions. You collect the data consists largely of words. Don't get bored when you collect data, because that's really the very idea of qualitative research. Just the words, the descriptions, and descriptions and analysis of words for the themes. Conducts inquiry in subjective and biased manner. So again, for example, we talk about oil painting. The qualitative data of, let's say, this oil painting, what describe it, you know, using your senses. For example, your sense of sight, it's blue, green color, there's a gold frame. You use your sense of smell, it's old, musty, the sense of touch, okay, and many more. Okay, so here the fundamental points or difference between qualitative and quantitative data would be discussed. Okay, so the data type, okay, for example, classification of objects is based on attributes, that's quality. Okay? The research method is exploratory in qualitative data. The approach of inquiry in the case of qualitative data, again, I think this was made mention in the earlier definition, is subjective. Okay? I think this is the same with the other slides. Okay? So when we do qualitative research, um, is it economical? Is it flexible? It opens a door again to the questions of the why and the how, and the richness of data is very important. So again, the definition of it, the role of your qualitative research data, the outcome of it, to improve the concepts. You clarify your research design, including the data collection approach, and you'll be able to draft a questionnaire. Okay? So research usually starts by questions like, how do people feel while living under occupation? How can a teacher use principles from behaviors psychology to help a student with autism succeed in an elementary school? The key features of qualitative research is the collection primarily of data. The methods emphasize observations about the natural behavior and the artifacts that capture the social life. The exploratory research question. It typically begin their projects seeking to discover what people think and how they act and why in some social settings. And the inductive reasoning that moves from one specific kinds of statement to the more general ones. So you be subjective, the reflex research design may need to be reconsidered or modified in response to new developments, and the sensitivity to the subjective role of the researcher. The quality or the qualitative researcher should be sensitive to the role they play in the process of data collection, because the researcher would definitely be an instrument in doing this kind of research. So there are strengths. Again, the richness of the data. You can investigate the complexity and the sensitive issues. You can explain the phenomena. You can generate new ideas and theories to explain and overcome the problems. And people are studied in their own environment with increased credibility. Of course, there are also limitations. this can be very time consuming and generate a huge amount of data. Imagine, no, being able to review the 300 pages of the transcription. And data analysis can be difficult because of the amount of data and no clear strategy in doing your analysis. And that's why I was telling you, you can be author specific in your research design. The interpretation of the data may be subjective, but reflexivity or the reflexivity can help to minimize this. Okay? For example, now you talk about I'm talking about we'll talk about um, the four the four popular research design, namely the phenomenology, the grounded theory, ethnography, and the case study. So first, of course, there's still narrative, but I'm going to focus on the popular ones. So when you talk about the focus or the focus of your research is phenomenology, you talk about the understanding of the essence of the experience about a phenomena. Okay, for example, you can talk about the phenomena. Okay, you try to understand the phenomena of, let's say, the camaraderie experienced by many people during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay? While in the grounded theory, the focus would be developing a theory grounded from the data in the field. For example, you would want to know or understand, let's say, the origin of tattooing. Okay, tattoo. Of course, you have to be able to look for for let's say, someone who probably from the mountains, no, an ethnic from the mountains, or really a person who has ancestors of doing, let's say, tattooing. In ethnography, you try to describe and interpret a cultural or a social group, an ethnic group, the culture or a social group. Let's say you try to understand or describe let's say, the millennials. Okay, let's say young people who are in the X and Y Z generation. In a case study, you develop an in-depth analysis of a single case or a multiple case. Let's say leadership, management, or the practices of, let's say, teachers or practices of schools. Now, in the data collection for phenomenology, normally long interviews with up to around 10 people. Okay, but then again, I was telling you earlier, this will depend on the approval of your panelists. In the grounded theory, interviews with 20 or 30 individuals to saturate the categories and detail the theory. When you say saturation, there will come a point wherein all of the things that they are saying are just the same. And when you reach that point, that you've noticed that majority of the participants are saying the same based on the transcription, then you are already in the point of saturation. For ethnography, primarily observations and interviews with additional artifacts during extended time in the field. Normally, in an ethnography, you would have to be able to stay in that social group or let's say ethnic group. They say in literature around 3 to 6 months for you to really, get to feel and really have a very good observation. Okay? Maybe you can stay in for 3 to 6 months to truly observe what is happening in that particular group. In a case study, this could be multiple sources. You could have several, you could have more than seven, and it could be a single case study. Okay? You can just focus on one organization. Now, in terms of the data analysis for phenomenology, okay, you talk about the statements, the meanings, the themes, the general description of the experience. For the grounded theory, I would say that grounded theory is the most challenging of the research designs because you have to do the open coding, the actual coding, the selective coding, the conditional matrix, and of course you really have to have um, someone who is going to guide you or an expert in the grounded theory. Rarely can you find experts on the grounded theory, but it's very challenging and very exciting. Then you have the ethnography, description, analysis, and interpretation. And for the case study, the description, the themes, and assertions. Uh, I would have to tell you that case study, I think, is one of the popular one. Normally, my students who are in the senior high school would usually do the case study. My students in the masters and the PhD, normally they go for the grounded theory or the pheno and the ethnography, but some would still do the case study. And you have the narrative form. Okay. Uh, uh, yeah, the narrative form for phenomenology, descriptions of the essence of the experience, and the grounded theory, the theory or the theoretical model. Okay, the model that you would have to create, okay, at the end or as a part of the outcome of the research. And the ethnography, you talk about the description of the cultural uh, behavior of a group or the cultural group. And in the case study, in-depth study of a case or cases. Okay? Normally, in titles of your qualitative research, you can easily find out in the title whether it's phenomenology, grounded theory, ethnography, and case study. Of course, if it's ethnography, it's very obvious that but that you're focusing on an ethnic group or a particular social group. The phenomenology, normally you get to see in the titles understanding, yeah, the word understanding. Ethnography, normally you get to see the word exploring. Okay? Um, in case study, normally you get to see words, let's say, practices. Okay? And in grounded theory, this would be very unique. And then how to get your qualitative data. I think this was made mention earlier. You could either do the interviews or uh, case studies, the expert opinions, the focus group discussion, the open-ended survey questionnaires, which is normally being done, and the observational observation. However, this open-ended method of research does not always lend itself to bringing you the most accurate results to big questions. And analyzing the results is quite, difficult because people will use different words and phrases to describe their points of view and may even not even talk about the same things if they find space to roam with the responses. In some cases, it may be more effective to go full quantitative, for example, for your questions. I think this is for quantitative data, so we're going to skip on that. Now, if you're working with a particular research design, this is, I think, my advice to you. The following expert list I will provide you to help you match the specific qualitative research designs with the appropriate qualitative data analysis strategies. As what I've told you earlier, you have to be author specific in your research design. Okay, for example, for uh, the grounded theory, you might want to check on the following authors: Burks and Mills, Sharmas, but the most popular ones for a grounded theory is Glaser, Strauss, and Corbin. Remember that for grounded theory, you can focus on Glaser, Strauss, and Corbin. You will never get wrong in terms of how they do the grounded theory with those two popular authors. You also have here the thematic analysis and ethnography. Spradley. Spradley is the popular one. You can also use Walcott or any of the three, but Spradley normally is being done for ethnographic research. Now we proceed with even with for ethnography, Van Manen. Okay, Van Manen is normally being used. Many of my students are using Van Manen, and I am also recommending Van Manen. Okay, aside from Spradley. For feminology, you have Colaisi, Georgie, Holston, Mustakas, Smith, Flowers, Larkin, also Van Manen. My recommendation for feminology would normally be Colaisi and Georgie. Remember that, Colaisi and Georgie, especially in the how the data analysis is very clear for the two authors, Colaisi and Georgie. For a case study, um, stake, and I wasn't able to include here Robert Yin, Robertyin, Yin, Robert Yin. I normally use Robert Yin in case study because he does a multiple case study or a single case study. So you might want to check Robert Yin, Yin, aside from stake. Of course, you also have the mixed methods by Cresswell, Plano, Clark, and Tashakori and Tedley. But if there are new authors, no, new authors on a specific a research design, um, you can probably use it as well. But you just have to really study it carefully. Okay? But the ones that I've made mention here are the most popular ones being used in many of the researches. And then in the data analysis, I think this is one of the most important part in doing qualitative research. Okay, when you do the actual analysis already, process of the systematically searching, and you arrange the interview manuscripts or the transcripts, the observation notes that you have, or the other non-textual materials. So when you analyze the qualitative data, it entails reading, a large amount of transcriptions, looking for similarities and differences. And sometimes you will get bored and tired. That's an actual example, of how I do it, the traditional way. I've learned this from one of my PhD teacher. I remember years way back, no. Conventionally, researchers cut and paste and use colored pens to categorize the data. So this is the traditional ones. But if you have a software, yeah, well and good if you have a software. But of course, it could be expensive because you have to be able to purchase the software with license. And most importantly, when you're doing qualitative research, coding is very important. Okay. So you see there in the illustration, no? The transcript, okay, the similarities and the differences, you code them, okay. Categorizing the data is the most important stage in the qualitative data analysis process. Coding and data analysis are not synonymous, though coding is a crucial aspect of the qualitative data analysis process, meaning you are now arranging, no? So as you are not going to get confused. Coding merely involves subdividing the huge amount of raw information or data and subsequently assigning them into categories. Okay, so you already have a code, then you put them all together as a category, and coming up with the core category or themes. Because the category or the themes later on are the ones who's going to answer later on your research questions. Again, the categories or themes that you have later on collected, you group them together, they're the ones that who's going to answer your research questions. In simple terms, codes are tags or labels for allocating identified themes or topics from the data compiled in the study. So when you do coding, traditionally coding was done manually with the use of colored pens to label, categorize data, and subsequently cutting and sorting the data. I have to admit, although I'm still young, I really got used to doing coding the traditional way. Given the advancement of software technology, electronic methods of coding, data are increasingly used by qualitative researchers such as the NVivo. Okay, this is one of the computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software that you can actually use. The CA or the CAQ DAS developed by the QSR International. I'm not promoting this one, but if you would want to use other softwares in terms of coding, and that would be your choice. The world's largest qualitative research software developer. But remember, it's expensive. So coding is done repeatedly until there are patterns that you get to see. Okay? Major patterns would arise. Now you can visualize coding by thinking of an essay written on a piece of paper with you cutting the sentences with a scissor and filing them under a folder with a certain classification. Now coding has three types in which succeeding types are more centrally organized than the preceding types. Okay? So in a nutshell, so I've talked about a lot about coding, which I find very important, is when you take your textual data and break it into discrete parts. That's actual coding, is when you draw connections between your codes. And you have the selective coding, is when you select one central category that connects all the codes from your analysis and captures the essence of your research. So it's pretty much like the concepts, the categories, and later on the themes. The themes later on, again, when you talk about the concepts, you break your data into discrete parts and create codes to label them. Then you categorize them. You begin to draw connections between the codes. And later on, the themes, you connect all your categories together around with one category. And then the themes later on, of course, will be able to answer. Okay, will be able to answer your research questions. I think that was similar to the other one. Okay, a concept map is a visual organization. Okay, and representation of knowledge. So it shows the concepts and ideas and the relationship among them. You can create a concept map by writing the keywords and then drawing arrows between the ideas that are related. Then you add a short explanation by the arrow to explain how the concepts are related. That's why I was telling you, in a qualitative research, you normally focus on the concepts of the research itself. So I think that's it for my presentation. No? The basic ones of the basic ones in doing qualitative research, particularly with the research designs.
Thank you, Dr. Daddy. Participants, if there are any queries or any interaction you want to have with Dr. Daddy, so we can have few minutes for that. So kindly, if there
So
is any question.
So again, I would like to remind our participants to be author specific in your qualitative research design. So you will never get wrong with that. Either for phenomenology, case study, ethnography, or grounded theory. Focus on the author itself and you will never get wrong with that.
Uh,
Yeah.
thank you, sir. Yes, yes, please.
Dr. Daddy, my question is that when I am basically from literature background.
Okay.
Okay, so when I want to do this, what kind of theory which I can use? Because you have given regarding the grounded theory.
That will depend. That will depend on what particular topic you're venturing. For let's say if you're doing a grounded theory, that will depend on the topic that you're going to do, because there are um, normally for the literature, I was telling you earlier, sometimes you can't find any literature. The literature would later on emerge after you have conducted your actual interview. It will emerge later on. I remember I didn't do a grounded theory. I tried, but I remember my teacher who did the grounded theory, as in totally, she did not have literature. The literature appeared later on after, after the actual the interview, or the participants being interviewed already and transcribed. Then you can actually see the literature already, because it's a theory, no? I mean, uh, you're lucky if you're going to be able to find the theory, no? Because grounded theory is very unique. It's really different.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. Thank you.
good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening.
This is Dr. Muhammad Firoz Alam from Bihar.
Hi, good
So
evening.
yes, sir. Uh, you have delivered a very precious lecture, sir. And my question is very simple. Research, the word research. Think about the word research. Means something is search. And the word here, research means adding the prefix. Means the thing is search. When you are going to research, what does it mean? What does it signify, sir?
Are you talking about the word research?
Search means something is already searched, but research mean what you are going to do. Research prefix here, using the word prefix,
It
something already searched.
Yeah, it can be. It can be because research is, it's complex. No, doing research is complex, and normally um, we have different perspectives on how to be able
बस
to
इक्को ही काट के पानी पा दो
on how to do research. No, normally, even if you're the brightest, no, when you're already in I'm talking about those masters and the PhD students, no, when you're already there defending your paper in the final stages of your final defense, for some of the panelists, it's not good, even if you are already in the final defense. Even if you have completed your data already, your analysis, some of the panelists would not, they would see it as not good. And sometimes, um, I personally, sometimes it would be unfair, no, very unfair, for the researcher. But I guess when we do research, hopefully, um, the ones who are reviewing, reviewing either for publication, there's a blind review when you publish a paper, no? Sometimes it is very hurtful that, despite you being able to really do the thorough process of doing research, you'll be able to see your paper not being approved, no? But that's the way it is with research, you continuously try to improve your craft until hopefully you meet the standards being set by the other researchers.